Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and this is Dream Fights, where we pick a fight from the past of two of our all-time great fighters and pit them against each other and see who we think would have won. So I bring in my regular co-hosts, Grant Tassie Brown, Peter Maniatis and Mike Altamura. Welcome again, guys. Should be a great show.
Good to be on, Lyndon.
This is an interesting one because, again, I'm going to kick us off tonight with the first one and then we'll rotate it around week by week. So really keen to see what you guys have in store. For me tonight, I've been a bit of a low fruit picker tonight. I've gone for two pretty easy ones to go for, but I think it's a mouth-watering clash, and I'm referring to the Pac-Man, Manny Pacquiao against Manos de Piedra, Roberto Duran. Now, what better way to start this this segment? So, I think we've decided to go from memory. It was the 2005 to 2008 Pacquiao, and I think the late 70s, maybe early 80s Duran. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a little bit hard for these ones because both of them were so up and, well, not down, but so went through so many weight divisions in their career. But Duran sort of started at lightweight and went right up to super middleweight, where Pacquiao, I think, what did he start at flyweight? Did he, Pete, and then up as a welterweight?
Junior welter.
Light middle.
Super welter.
Super welter. Yeah, well, this is some image of the Pac-Man. Pete, tell us what, actually what we'll do first before we go to the video. We'll go to his record first. So 62, 8 and 2, 39 KOs. I've just listed the actual belts that he's won there. I know he's won some Ring Magazine and lineal titles and all the rest of it. These are the actual belts that he's won. Pete, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But he also was a Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year in 2006, 2008, 2009. I think his list of achievements is just too long to go through. But Pete, you probably know, well, you do know Manny better than all of us. Give us some thoughts about the Pac-Man.
Well, he's got brilliant footwork, amazing hand speed. He can knock you out with either one of his hands. He's got extreme toughness. He punches in volume. He punches in different angles. He sets a lot of punches up. He's just one of those one in a million type of fighters.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Mike, what do you sort of see as his main qualities, and more importantly, could he stand his ground against some of those all-time greats from yesteryear?
Look, I had the pleasure of spending almost 3 weeks in camp with Pacquiao when he was preparing to return against Brandon Rios, and what impressed me so much about him was, one, his work ethic, two, how underestimated his right hook is. And people tell you, like, Manny's early career was pretty much predominantly a one-handed fighter, all, left hand, lead left hand, so that when he went to Freddie Roach, he evolved a lot. He developed his jab. His right hook, to me, was his best punch because it's just such a sharp, shock kind of punch. And when you possess the speed and power that Pacquiao did at the height of his powers, he's a chance against anybody historically.
Yep, certainly was. And Tassie, what are your thoughts on the Pac-Man, mate? Do you think he would hold up against fighters from yesteryear, or do you think he's more suited to the modern age?
No, I mean, look, you can't deny his greatness. I mean, the era of those Mexicans, Morales, Barrera, and Marquez, which is really where he got his name from, beating them guys. I mean, what a great era of all of them four together. It was a bit like the modern day Fabulous Four. So, I mean, he cleaned them guys out. He went up in divisions and carried his power, which you don't usually carry your power when you're moving up so much, but he carried his power up to each weight division. Not only that, he pretty much took the power of the bigger guys as well, like the Margaritos, the Cottos. My best Pacquiao fight, I think, was a win over Cotto. To me, that's the most impressive fight of it. He destroyed Mikel Cotto, who was a beast, who went on to, become champion again, and the middleweight champion. So to me, that's a standout win in his career. But I mean, you can't deny his greatness, obviously.
And the amount of titles, Pete, was just amazing. I've listed the titles there, but pretty much I think he's recorded as pretty much an 8-division world champion if you throw in the ring and sort of lineal titles.
Well, he beat Marco Antonio Barrera and he beat Ricky Hatton and all the guys back then. Barrera was a featherweight king and Ricky Hatton was a man as well, so he beat those guys. It's just how you look at it. I think Ricky Hatton was the IBO and Barrera was a Ring Magazine champion. But, you know, for me, it's the person you beat. So well, Hatton...
Yeah. Go ahead, mate.
You know, Hatton was really a demolition. No one expected that.
Well, funny story. My first big fight ever was this particular fight. Was Pacquiao and Hatton. On a bit of a whim, I decided to go to Las Vegas by myself and decided I was going to go to this fight. And yeah, I was actually here for this, and it was an amazing night, is all I can say. It was to see the Pac-Man live in his prime. I think this was when he was at his absolute peak. I know he was great as a smaller fighter, but I think when he beat, Diaz, is that right? And then he went on to beat De La Hoya after that. Yeah. And absolutely just embarrassed De La Hoya. I know he was past his peak, De La Hoya, but the demolition that Manny put on him that night, I don't think I've seen anything sort of like that since Holmes did it against Ali, and we all know sort of what state he was in, but De La Hoya wasn't that bad. But then to see him, what he did against Hatton, and then follow it up with that fight against Cotto, was just, I think that was peak Manny. I think that was when he was at his strongest, his fastest, and power just in both hands. So just an amazing fighter. So let's have a look at his record and his opponent, sorry. And this guy certainly needs no introduction. Roberto Duran, record of 103 wins, 16 losses, 70 KOs. A lot of those losses came late in his career. You can see the belts that he held there. WBA lightweight champion, even though he was regarded as the undisputed champion. WBC welterweight champion over Sugar Ray Leonard, WB junior middleweight champion, and the WBC middleweight champion. And who can forget that fight against Iran Barkley? So I think there was something like 20 years in between, or even longer, between that lightweight title and the middleweight title. And you can see there, Ring Magazine ranked #1 lightweight of all time, and inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2007. So Mike, this guy is just the epitome of beast.
Yeah, phenomenal. I think that, and the wild part with Duran is most people remember his fights against the Fabulous Four, and as you outlined, them two near miraculous victories in the 80s where people had been, you know, considering him to be completely washed up and finished. Well, firstly, the 154-pound world title against Davey Moore, which was what was that, an 8-round destruction in New York with Davey Moore, and then of course the WBC middleweight title over Iran Barkley 6 years later. People remember those outings. They remember the brave outing with Hagler, you know, the 8-round to 7 defeat. But really, he was at the peak of his powers at lightweight.
Which is him here, look at that.
He's considered the greatest lightweight of all time. It's a shame that probably the best opponent he fought at lightweight was Esteban de Jesus, the Puerto Rican. 3 bouts, de Jesus shocked him the first time, 10-round decision. Duran come back and knocked him out twice. But it's a shame that he didn't have someone, say, the stature of a Leonard or a Hagler or someone of that note at lightweight. He beat a lot of great lightweights, you know, Sol Mambi, Guts Ishimatsu, Ken Buchanan, Royal Kobayashi. He beat a lot of great fighters at that weight. The Australian.
Well, Alexis Arguello, wasn't it? He was touted as being an opponent too.
Yeah, Hector Thompson.
Exactly.
Hector Thompson, yeah.
Even late 70s, the victory over Carlos Palomino goes under the radar. So at like 135, 140, he beat a lot of top-tier operators, but none of them quite carry the name value or the fighters that he was to compete against and defeat in the 80s. So his lightweight reign is a little bit forgotten historically, but he definitely was at his best in those days. I mean, I've gone back preparing for this podcast. I've gone back and watched some of those fights, and what really I found staggering was just Duran's conditioning, which was just, you know, he ramped up the pressure with each passing round. phenomenal to see the style that we got accustomed to Duran in the 80s, that catch and roll and shoot and counter style, to see him evolve and developing as a lightweight.
He just had it all though, didn't he? He had just the poise, but he had the timing, the speed, the power, the head movement. I mean, you see sometimes he'd just little twist of the head and he'd make a punch miss by a centimetre. You know, just an unbelievable fight. I'm with you, and Tassie, you can come in here. I think I agree with Mike here that everyone sort of remembers that Duran fought sort of Leonard, Hearns, Hagler and onwards, but this time as a lightweight tends to get sort of forgotten in his career.
Yeah, well, a lot of people only go on recent things of boxing. That's the trouble. When we talk boxing, you've got to remember their whole career and the history. So if you are talking Duran, you're talking at lightweight. He was 71-1 before he beat Leonard. The only loss was to Esteban de Jesus, like Mike said. Revenged that twice by knockout. Himself was a great fighter as well. He unified the division, Duran, when he beat de Jesus. But I mean, 71-1 before he went up the waterweight to take on the great Ray Leonard. And we just spoke about Leonard in depth before. So, first man to beat Leonard. As I said, he as a lightweight, he was just too strong for everyone. He was so... It was his conditioning and his strength and his great chin. I mean, you know, he dominated for as long as he wanted to. But then when he went up, you know, for the biggest slice of the pie versus Leonard. But I mean, you know, he beat Ernesto Marcel as well. And Mike read off a few blokes that he beat, like Mamby and that. But he beat, as a lightweight, you know, he probably misses some, you know, bigger names. But I mean, to those that know a lot of the history, he did beat everyone in his era, and he would have reigned for as long as he wanted to at lightweight. He not decided to go up and fight Leonard and beat him in the brawl in Montreal, obviously. And then there later on to beat Barkley and Davey Moore and all them bigger guys. I mean, Barkley just knocked out Tommy Hearns, and I mean, Duran went up and beat him. The fight against Hagler, I mean, you know, what a great job that was, you know, giving Hagler a really tougher fight than most expected. So, if we're talking Duran, we're talking versus Pacquiao. We're talking Duran at lightweight, a prime Duran.
Yeah, and the thing is too, Pete actually skipped junior welterweight, didn't he? Went straight up and fought Leonard, and I don't think I've seen a more, you know, menacing performance. I mean, even after the fight, he refused to shake his hand. He pushed him away. He was still calling him names. I mean, this is a bad man before the days of the Tysons of the world, wasn't it?
Yeah, he wasn't. Oh, what can you say? I mean, he just was a fighter right down to his bootlaces, and he just the skill he had, his hand-eye coordination, his toughness. You know, he could do anything that he wanted to do at any particular time in the ring. He was never uncomfortable, and one of the greatest fighters of all time. What can you say about Roberto Duran? He's just the hands of stone. He'll always be one of the greatest of all time. You know, as
was his opponent Manny Pacquiao, and just an unbelievable resume this guy has. So there it is. There's a little bit of background on the fighters. We're going to kick it off with Tassie. We'll work our way down. Who wins and why? Nice and simple.
Yeah, I think Roberto wins. I think just at the lightweight limit, you know, too strong, too ferocious. I mean, Manny was great. And obviously, if we're talking about the years that you mentioned, I think 2-5, 2-6. Obviously, Pacquiao's marquee wins was over Morales. He lost to Morales the first time, then beat him the next two by stoppage. But Morales was on the downhill. He was 1-6, you know, in them fights. He lost to Barrera, he lost to Zahir Rahim. So Morales probably was on the downhill. And then he had a split decision win over Marquez. I mean, he beat Larios, Barrera.
Did you have him beating Marquez?
Sorry?
Did you have him winning against Marquez, or did you think that Marquez won?
I had Marquez winning, yeah. So, I mean, you know, great competition, the best of the best. And he had, you know, obviously had some good moments. But, I mean, the win over Morales, you know, as I said, Morales was 1-6. Probably not as big as made him as it should be. You know, I just think he's too small would say too small. I'll take that back because he went on to. I just saying at that time, and then you got to stick it to the lightweight era. I think that Duran's too good, too strong, and yeah, he wears him down. And yeah, I just think he has his way with Pacquiao.
Mm. What result did you say, mate? I might have missed that. KO decision. What do you?
No, I won't say KO. I mean, I'll give it a points decision. I think he wins unanimously. I mean, Pacquiao had a good chin, obviously. He was only that crazy right hand versus Marquez. I mean, which that was next level. But I mean, Pacquiao walked through guys like Cotto and Margareta. But we're just saying at lightweight, which we're sticking to a division at lightweight in the era that you mentioned, 2-5, 2-6 for Pacquiao. Duran beats him by decision.
Decision. Okay. Pete, you're a big fan of the Pac-Man. How do you see it?
Well, Duran had 12 defences, 11 by KO at lightweight, and Manny Pacquiao only had one fight at lightweight. So it's hard to judge at that weight, but
you could probably go from maybe super featherweight to maybe junior welterweight, just because I did see he only had one fight, but just around that.
Yeah,
area.
Manny sort of started excelling as he got heavier, and especially after that, had that peak with the De La Hoya fight, and obviously parlayed to the Cotto fight, and then went on to Margarito, and he had that in Hatton. So he kind of, as he went up, he kind of seemed to be getting stronger. It seemed to really, agree with his body. And Hearns and Hagler, I mean, I always think of that fight, and I know it's completely different, but what I'm trying to say here is you've got a guy like Roberto Duran, and at lightweight, 12 defences, 11 by knockout. He's going to be so hard to beat. I don't think anyone beats Roberto Duran at lightweight, and but when he did go up in weight, he was vulnerable, and we saw Hitman Hearns knock him out cold with a peach, and he just went down face first. So he is susceptible to being knocked out up in weight, where Manny did get knocked out as well when he got up in weight, obviously by Marquez. So different eras, hard to judge, but I've got Roberto Duran winning a split decision against Manny at lightweight.
Yep.
I think it'd be just a cracking fight. And yeah, I've got Roberto, because I don't think anyone beats Roberto Duran at lightweight, and he proved himself at that weight. So it's hard to argue with stats.
Certainly is. And Mike, how do you see it? Who wins and why?
Yeah, I'll say this: what a great fight stylistically. I think that one thing that in comparing notes, I try to look at styles first. You look at the record, you look at what's been accomplished, but you got to look at styles. Duran was a notably slow starter, especially early career. Later career too, but notably slow starter. With De Jesus, first two fights against De Jesus, he got knocked down in round one. In the second fight, it was a heavy knockdown. Right hand and then the left hook over the top, dropped him pretty heavy. So you can't just discredit Pacquiao in the fight, because as we've seen Pacquiao the first fight with Marquez, Pacquiao with Hatton, if Pacquiao was on early, he could come out and blitz you fast with hand speed. So it would have been, first 4 rounds of this fight would have been tantalizing, because there's a chance that Manny's speed could overwhelm him and catch him. I think that if Manny don't catch him, which is the way that I would lean, balance of probabilities, I think that Duran's work rate starts to break down Manny. I think that Duran had an exceptionally high work rate. He was working 3 minutes of every round. And like I said earlier, if you go back and watch it lightweight, he was ramping up the pressure every single round. And one thing that Roberto did exceptionally well at lightweight, which he had elements of it, that he adjusted his style when he went up in weight. At lightweight, he would catch and shoot. So he would, say with Pacquiao, he would wait for that lead left hand of Pacquiao, and then as soon as he caught it, exploded for a 3 or 4 punch combination. And we know with Manny had a habit sometimes of overshooting his left hand. Manny's right hook, I could see, given Roberto a lot of trouble. I think that Roberto would have been able to withstand that, start adapting. Roberto had a habit as well with his jab. He flowed out his jab, almost to draw a counter off of the right hand. And then as soon as that was thrown, bang, he'd drop his own right hand down the center. I just think that once he would adapt to the speed of Manny, he would start to impose his will as the fight rolled on. Look, Roberto's record at lightweight, you have to think that he might be a chance to score a late round stoppage because of the pressure that he brings. But I would favour probably like a 10 round to 5 kind of job to Roberto Duran, a decision. I would say like 145, 140, something like that. But that's not to discredit Pacquiao. I think Pacquiao would be very, very lively early in the fight.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much the way I see it. I think that I've also picked Duran to win. I think really, really tough to split them because, I mean, as great as Roberto was, Manny Pacquiao is a great fighter as well. And I just think the thing that tipped me over the edge for Duran is that Duran's such a cool, sharp shooting. Yeah, he could punch, and I mean, obviously he did get emotional in there sometimes, but overall he was a cool, calculated fighter. He really deviated from the fight plan. He just was always, as I said, cool. He picked the shots. He'd wait. Where Manny, I sort of found that he tended to get a little bit emotional, and he would lose his way if he got hit or rocked. It was pretty much all right. That's it. Let's throw down and away we go. And I just think that's what sort of tipped me towards Duran. I can't see Duran deviating from the game plan and getting caught up in a slugfest with Pacquiao. I think Pacquiao would, as I said, if he got caught or flustered or whatever, he would just tend to just to go for it. And that's how he got caught a lot in a few of his fights. So if that makes sense, I just think the fact that Duran's a bit more cool. I've said that a few times now, and calculate. I think he would beat Pacquiao in a decision. But I think one thing we didn't mention was whether it was a 12 or 15 round fight. You know, I suppose we'd have to. I think Mike, you had it as a 15 round fight. I think it was that obviously Manny never fought in a 15 round fight, but I think that would even more play into Duran's hands. I think he'd get better as the rounds went on. And I think he would win pretty similar to you, Mike. I think 10 rounds to 5, but taking nothing away from Manny, he's sort of got such great respect for him, and I think I had him at number 4 or 5 on my all-time list. So I just think he's a phenomenal fighter. But I just think Duran was just a one in a lifetime fighter, and especially at that weight. And I think he beats Pacquiao in a close, well, not close decision, but in a decision. I think it's actually surprising. I was thinking that there might be sort of knockouts from either way because both fighters had incredible knockout records, and the fact that we've all picked Roberto Duran by decision just, I suppose, shows the quality of the fighters. But can't argue with any of you guys. I think overall it'd be a fantastic fight.
Yeah, I would have had Manny. If I was visualising the fight, I've got Manny dropping Duran early in the fight.
Yep.
A little bit of like a Marquez thing, and then Duran giving him a bit more respect, and eventually wearing him down. But because of the knockdown, it becomes a split decision win for Duran. But I've definitely, Manny's speed would have definitely troubled Duran, especially when you go back to the Thomas Hearns fight. Hearns' speed and that, Duran just wasn't comfortable with it, and that, you could see a while when you're watching it, he's going to get iced here. He just wasn't comfortable with that speed, and Manny had just as much speed as Hearns, maybe more speed, but he didn't have probably the brute power of Hearns because Hearns was such more.
He did start really strongly, didn't he, Manny? And I suppose the other intangible that you've got to throw in there, Mike, is that, and I know we're going on the best of both at those weights, but you always knew what you were going to get with Pacquiao, but with Duran, you weren't quite sure which one might show up sometimes.
No, but at lightweight, he was pretty consistent. He had, people say like with De Jesus, the first fight, that was an off night, but De Jesus was a great fighter. He's a fellow Hall of Famer too. And it was maybe a slightly off night, but really Duran's lifestyle started to regress and get out of control post landed the first fight. Before that, he was a hungry young lion. It's like, that was, even though, where was that fight in Canada, right? That was like his coming to America moment. And when he had that fight to break him out, it affected his hunger to consistently train. So I think at lightweight, you wouldn't have had those problems. And look, Pete, you know with Pacquiao too, Pacquiao didn't always have the best lifestyle either.
No, no, that's what people don't realise. Manny, early on in his career, was a party animal. Manny wouldn't have one San Mikel beer. Manny would have 20. And it'd go for a couple of days. He was a party animal. So it's not Manny the senator now. So he used to be a party animal, but everything you do would be excessive. So that's why he's improved so much in his later part of his career, because he doesn't touch alcohol anymore. And, you know, he's just a completely changed man. It's like he's a different person now than what he used to be. So
I don't want to get off the subject, but talking about legendary boxers as party animals, I was reading a thing about Julio Cesar Chavez after he beat Camacho with he had bloody El Chapo with him, and they were all giving it a bit of a nudge in Vegas, and mate, all the cartels were there, and
you can imagine.
Just what a party!
Oh jeez. Hey, just Tazzy, quick one for you. Do you think? And it's a question for all of you guys. Do you think, I know we've gone for that sort of lightweight, super featherweight, junior welterweight sort of thing, but if you had to pick the best, let's just say weights weren't an issue, if you had to pick the best Manny at whatever weight he was against the best Duran or whatever weight he was, and I'm thinking, I think I said before, I think the peak Manny for me was when he was more of a light welterweight to welterweight, where Duran was obviously a bit lower. Do you think it changes the result or doesn't sway you at all?
I don't think so. I mean, no disrespect to Hatton's no Duran. Like, let's get that straight. Hatton's best win was over an old Costa Zoo. You know, he got beat by Floyd. I mean, you know, Hatton, you know, I like Ricky, actually know him as a person, but he wasn't one of the greats in the recent eras. Cotto, as I said, Cotto's win, you know, was Manny. That's my favourite. Oscar was, yeah, as I said, you know, we all passed it. I mean, great performance. You can only beat who you can beat at the time. I mean, it's not the fighter's fault. If someone's over the hill or someone's declining or whatever, you can only beat who's in front of you. The Cotto fight, to me, was Manny's unbelievable. I don't think it matters. I think, you know, Duran beat the great Leonard. And, I mean, you know, he beat a lot of good fighters at lightweight. Almost come close to beating the great, unbeatable Marvin Hagler at the time. Big middleweight. I mean, Barkley, who destroyed the great Tommy Hearns. I don't think it matters, but it's a good argument. It's a good argument.
Because like Mike, it could be like I look at, from what I would love to see would be the Manny that beat De La Hoya, Hatton, and Cotto against the Duran that beat Leonard. Does that change your way of thinking, or it doesn't matter? Duran wins no matter what weight or error or whatever they fought.
No, I think that irrespective if it's 140, if it's 135, whatever it is, 147, I still lean to Duran. Duran at 147 was still good enough to handle Ray Leonard the first time around, which that win alone is better than any win on Pacquiao's record. So, and that's no disrespect to Manny's resume, but you've got to lean his way. One thing I wanted to note about both these guys, which I admire immensely, they won world titles at weights without ever being weight bullies or without ever determining any rehydration clauses, nothing. They literally, Duran moved up to 160. He's a small 160. Pacquiao moved up to 154. He's the smallest 154 pounder of all time. You know, they never had rehydration clauses, never had, you know, the catch weights, nothing. And that's what, it's a quality act to admire about both guys.
He did have a catch weight with Cotto, brother.
The 144?
There was a catch weight with Cotto, brother.
No, but Mike's saying about the rehydration after the weigh-in.
Yeah, so okay, but there was a catch weight. Cotto did have to come down.
Yeah. But I think Cotto was pretty much fighting at 140 anyway, wasn't he? I think at the time, or not?
I think it was 147.
47, yeah. Yeah, but either way,
I mean, how would you rate Manny against Costa Zoo at 140?
Who?
Manny versus Pete Costa Zoo against Manny at 140.
Yeah, I've got to stick with Costa, but great fight.
Well, let's just maybe save that because I reckon
Costa,
that might be a good one
Costa
to.
Loves southpaws. Loves southpaws.
Yeah. Well, let's just hold that thought because I reckon that could be one for down the track that we can do. And the good thing about actually this division,
Linden's trying to get me and Tassie to blue.
Yeah, no. I'm just going to say the thing about
he wants the ratings to go up.
I was just going to say though, the beauty if you get these fights, we talk about these dream fights that we're doing, but you talk about De La Hoya and Mayweather and Pacquiao and Zhu and Chavez and Camacho, and I'd love to even throw the likes of the Vinny Pazienzas of the world in there. I mean, those sort of fights. I would love to see those. So that division alone. I mean, can you imagine like a Ricky Hatton against a Vinny Pazienza? I mean, how good would that be? So,
can I say something? A guy that he doesn't get talked about because he's dead and the way he died, but forget that. Edwin Valerio, was just knocking everyone out in the first round. I mean, how far could he would have went?
Yeah, it's a shame. We'll never know, isn't it? But all right, boys, we'll leave it at that. Sorry, Mike.
Aaron Price versus Kostya Tszyu.
All right. Yeah.
Great fight.
Yeah, certainly would be. All right. Well, let's. I think I can't remember. Did I say it's your turn next week, Pete? Did I say that, or I haven't chosen one yet?
Yeah, Pete's.
Pete. All right.
Okay.
Pete, it's your turn next week. So have a think about that. I think the overriding thing here is that Roberto Duran would beat Manny Pacquiao by decision. And I don't think you can sort of argue with that. Happy to again to hear what people out there have to say about it, because I'm sure there's some different opinions, but I think it's one of those fights where we've all got great admiration for Manny, but Duran was just something else. So we'll unanimously agree on Duran, and until next week, Pete, you better have a think about who's next, and look forward to seeing you then.
See you all next week, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you, boys.